Chapter -15.51 Invictus by Frank. "Invictus!" called Jax from the front of the room. "Is there a problem?" "She can't get a bike started," shouted Invictus, his green hair standing on end. "Yes, I can," yelled Minnow, trying to be heard above the roar of the motorbikes. "Let her sort it out," called Jax. Invictus glared at Minnow and got back onto his bike. Minnow started her bike and revved it loudly. I could see that her leg was red, but she clearly didn't want to make a fuss. "Right," shouted Jax. "I'm about to make our classroom even bigger than it is. It's all an illusion, but just bear in mind that the sea is now much further away." We all looked towards the ocean, and it seemed to be miles and miles to where the water met the ice. Jax continued. "Today's challenge is to go to the ice's edge and rescue a group of penguins. Escher and Solo are in charge, so follow their lead." As soon as Jax finished talking, Solo and Escher roared off. We all followed, ice chips and slush splattering into the air as our bikes slipped and slid all over the place. The spikes on our tyres only barely kept us upright, and the whole thing was a crazy mix of control and chaos. I could hardly believe that everything wasn't real. Then again, the physics of enchantment always makes things seem so lifelike. When we approached the penguins, they were terrified, screeching with their wild blend of honking and motorised purring. There was also a lot of click-clacking. One poor little baby just sat on his mother's feet, looking as if the world was about to end. We all turned off our bikes and sat, waiting for instructions. The sea was calm, but its icy surface made me shiver. Escher held up his hand, and I could hear his voice in my head. "Telepathy," he said. "Can everyone hear me? Put up your hand if you can." All our hands went up, so Escher continued. "These guys are in danger because predators are about to arrive, and in an earlier version of this exercise, all the penguins perished." I looked at the penguins, feeling glad that we'd arrived in time. "They'll follow our lead if some of us ride with our engines on silent and the rest of you wait here to ward off the predators." "What sort of predators are they?" telepathed Ben. "Probably dragon seals," replied Solo. "Who's up for staying back to ward them off?" Minnow and I put up our hands along with Ben and Sky. "Great," said Escher. "Anyone else?" Invictus put up his hand, and I felt myself groan on the inside. "Oh, great," I thought, and then I added, "not." Something about him made me feel on guard. Chapter -15 Saving Penguins by Frank. While the others were leading the penguins to safety, we sat on our bikes looking out to sea, keeping watch. "Get away from the edge," said Invictus. "Who put you in charge?" asked Minnow. "Fine," said Invictus. "Stay near the edge and fall in for all I care. Swim with the dragon seals." I frowned. "I'm Frank," I said, extending my hand to Invictus. "I don't do introductions," said Invictus. "Well, we do," said Minnow firmly. "I'm Minnow. This is my cousin Frank, and these are our friends Ben and Sky. Where are you from?" Invictus sighed. "Does it matter?" he asked. "No," said Minnow. "Fine, then let's do as we've been asked and ward off the dragon seals." As Invictus spoke, two gigantic dragon seals launched themselves out of the ocean and onto the ice. "Go!" called Invictus, speeding off. We were all following him when I realised that Minnow wasn't with us. Looking back, I could see that her bike had stalled again, and the dragon seals were madly bumping their way across the ice towards her. Both of them were blasting fire from their mouths, trying to melt the ice around her. "Minnow!" I yelled, turning around my bike with a wild spray of ice and charging back towards her. There was no time to start Minnow's bike, so she leapt onto my bike, clinging on tightly. As we sped away, the dragon seals charged Minnow's abandoned bike and dragged it into the sea. "You okay?" asked Sky as we pulled up next to her. "Not really," said Minnow, bursting into tears. Me neither, I said, my eyes also filling with tears. God, I'm shaking. Minnow started shivering. We need to get back, said Invictus. You're in shock. Minnow glared at him, but we followed his advice and rowed steadily towards our classmates and the waddle of penguins. I didn't know what to call a group of penguins before I had to write this part of our book, so I looked it up. If they're on water, they're called a raft, and if they're on land, they're called either a waddle or a rookery, and I liked the sound of waddle of penguins better than a rookery. Jax came over to us riding a bike that looked as if it was made of ice and lava. You okay? She asked, striding towards Minnow. She stalled her bike again, said Invictus. Jax knelt down, wrapping her academic gown around Minnow, and then, without any warning, her gown transformed. I just saw the ocean and worried that the predators might be more than we could handle. And then Invictus didn't want to be introduced, and suddenly the dragon seals were there and we took off. Looking at Minnow, Sky added, I'm so sorry, I didn't notice that your bike wouldn't start. Sky's eyes filled with tears and she gave Minnow a hug. Minnow gave Sky a watery smile. Min, said Jax, how did you see things? I just thought we'd introduce one another, which probably took our minds off the main game, and then my bike wouldn't start, and I thought I was dead, and then... Minnow looked down, unable to go on. But it's just a game, said Invictus in a scathing voice. Is it? Asked Jax. Invictus rolled his eyes, looking as if he didn't care about anything. I think it's a game you won't be playing for a while, said Jax. Invictus sighed. Whatever, he muttered. Invictus, said Jax, we all know that your father has status in some places, but when you're at Marescimar, it's necessary that you learn what's important, and that is, as you know, above all else, having a decent heart is what we value here. I frowned at Invictus, feeling worried that anyone at Marescimar wouldn't have a decent heart. Invictus shook his head. You're never going to pass me, are you? He asked, his eyes flashing. This is all just a big fat game that I'm going to fail. Jax widened her eyes. The physics of enchantment is never just a big fat game that someone's going to fail, she said. It involves a lot of magic, but there is always some reality to it. You know that. Invictus looked down. Invictus was injured in a similar exercise a few years back, said Jax. Invictus sighed and shook his head. It shouldn't have happened, he said. It was negligence. I was cleared, said Jax. Please remember that. Invictus sighed. It's your game, he said, staring steadily at Jax. Play it how you like.